it's me, Jay, your GM. I use he, him, and sometimes they, them.
Hey, it's me, your heir. I use he, him, and this is Jay on Air, space, drawl, steel.
Yes, it is indeed, my friend. And today, we spent a couple weeks accumulating a small collective of people who are interested in our draw steel opinions. So now it's time for you to shit all over the game.
Yeah, yeah, we don't want any fucking fair weather fans. It's time for you people to, it's time for you people to leave when I come in with my spicy takes.
Draw Steel has four major pillars, which are right on the cover of the game: tactical, heroic, cinematic fantasy, or in a different order, but still. Those are the four main pillars of the game. And we would broadly agree that tactical and heroic, this game is. No
Yeah,
problems there. Yeah.
it's cinematic and fantasy, yeah, that I
Mm-hmm.
think I take slight issue with.
Mm-hmm.
Which let's take them in order, Jay. Let's go to cinematic. Let's do cinematic. All right. So I want to say first and foremost, cinematic as they've defined it, I do think they have nailed. Which is
Mm-hmm.
to say, they wanted to. It's all about. It's really in that first sentence there. Cinematic keywords is about how we like abilities and features to be strongly evocative. And in
Mm-hmm.
that, I think they have succeeded. All of the abilities you get are very evocative. I have a very direct picture in my mind anytime I use two shot or hamstring shot or any of these other abilities I'm getting from my kit or my class or what have you, as to what I'm doing within, the world of the game when I use one of those abilities. My thing is, I tend to think of cinematic not as things being evocative, but as giving the GM and the players a chance to, or the director and the players in this instance, a chance to be the cinematographer, right? To make up the action sequence and spell it all out and describe it in kind of fun and innovative and creative ways as they're going. So, because these things are so evocative, because they're so discreet in the way they're defined, I find them to actually be a little less cinematic in my mind because it's always the same thing every time. I'm not getting to, choreograph a cool fight scene that I can describe. I'm just, shooting two arrows every time I use two shot.
We've already established, though, that you're not doing the same thing every turn in this game as much as you are in other turns. So I think some of what you just said, it comes across as if you're saying, like, every turn is the same or something like that. And I don't think that's what you mean to
Oh, no,
say.
no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. What I mean is every time I use a certain ability, it is very discreetly defined because it's so evocative that I'm always doing the same thing every time I use that
Now, I
ability.
would
Like,
say,
yeah.
um, uh, you say it's evocative, and you say that when you read the abilities, you have an image in your mind. Is an
Mhm.
image in your mind not a scene? And is that not then cinematic?
So the line I would try to draw is the
Mhm.
difference between it being evocative and being cinematic. I think it is
Mhm.
evocative
Mhm.
if it puts an image in my head, but for it to be cinematic, I want to be the cinematographer. I think of some of the like more narrative games I've played. Like I was playing a session of Monster of the Week where one of my abilities as the spooky character allows me to kind of like prognosticate, and if I roll well, I get a series of options. So like I rolled well, our characters are at is like a modern urban fantasy thing. So we're chasing down these little gremlins who've snuck into a car show. And at the car show, there our GM happened to mention, oh, there's this big pneumatic, robot that folds down into a car and folds back out into a robot like a transformer. It's a showpiece. And one of these little gremlins was near it, and I rolled my move, and I got to do a little bit of damage with one option. But the other option I picked was the the target of my ability find something I left for them. I realized like, oh, I could, because this is a kind of I saw the future. I narrated this whole backstory of my character going to night school, learning mechanical engineering, specifically learning about pneumatics, sneaking into the car show the night before in order to hotwire this robot so that when this gremlin got close to it, it would scoop it up and punch it with its pneumatic hand. And that was nothing that was explicit in the rules, but because the rules were more open, this particular rule, this particular ability was more openly defined, I could create all this cool cinematography creatively on the fly, which I don't think you can do as readily with these very discreetly defined abilities in this much more tactical simulationist kind of game that Drawsteel is.
But aren't you kind of drawing too much, or maybe focusing a little over much on the combat side of things? Where, I mean, this, like we said, this is a tactical game. We've already agreed this is a tactical game. And so having
Mhm.
discrete, concrete, defined actions is part of having a tactical game. Um,
Absolutely.
and so the cinematics can come in a little more in montages, in negotiations, in those out of combat scenes where you do have a broader sphere of introducing a plot point, playing it out, using your abilities to guide that scene, using the dice and the rolls to allow that scene to have complications or to resolve positively. I think that there's something to be said that like cinematic. First of all, obviously, the main point of your thesis here starts with that there's a contradiction in how we define terms between how you're defining cinematic and how the game is defining cinematic. Um, but that, you know, I think at the end of the day, with their approach to cinematic here, they specifically say they want evocative abilities, and I would also say that, like, some way they maybe undersell the cinematography of this game, the cinematicness of this game, is montages and negotiations, which I do think are quite cinematic and quite film-esque.
Mhm.
Negotiations are a classic scene in high fantasy fiction where there's a political debate going on, a political negotiation, political maneuvering going on, finding the weakness of your opponent's arguments, maneuvering around them, that sort of thing. And all of that, I think, is pretty cinematic. So, not sure I'm ready to meet you all the way on giving up cinematic for them. I would say just very briefly, one of my problems with the term cinematic here is just that, like, when I think of cinematic, I don't necessarily think of what they define it as, and I think that's true of what you're saying as well. And
Mhm.
so it it may be just the wrong term for what they were trying to get at. I think evocative is a better word. Tactical, heroic, evocative fantasy might have
Mhm.
been better, but I think cinematic makes for a more intriguing keyword. Um, but anyway,
It's definitely a
so
more marketable keyword, I would say. It's a
yeah,
sexier keyword for sure.
so that's cinematic. Let's move on to fantasy. So, what is your issue with this game being fantasy? Because to me, this is like a slam dunk for Drawsteel. Drawsteel has all the fantasy stuff in it. It has dragons, it has orcs, it has ogres and trolls and giants
Absolutely.
and all that stuff.
S-
So I don't know how it's not fantasy.
and it is fantasy. Don't get me wrong. It is fantasy. It has dragons and orcs and
Hmm.
their takes on dwarves and all of this stuff. What it was is, I think we were both, and probably the folks who are watching this as well, followed the development of Draw Steel as it was coming out. And I know that they said that these core books, the Heroes and Monster books, were going to be very focused on Orden, which is their high heroic fantasy world. And within that world, they have, instances of your classic medieval European fantasy. I think Vasloria, the region of Vasloria, is meant to be that. And then they have more, Fey kind of fantasy, the wandering off into the woods and ending up in another world of fairies and mischievous fey creatures and whatnot. I heard Matt recently talking about how there are woads, elven forests that are rife with magic and whatnot all throughout the world. So I think that's all in there. The thing is, their wider scope is space fantasy, like the timescape, their overarching um, setting is space fantasy. And they said they were going to try to keep the space fantasy aspect in supplements, right? Like their first big adventure that's coming out, Crack the Sun, seems to be very much leaning into that space fantasy side of things. But they were going to keep it more traditional, heroic high fantasy in the core books. And few things snuck in there that I feel are totally at variance with that heroic high fantasy, like your Memenex, your Time Raiders. Memenex are kind of like sexy Modrons. Your Time Raiders are punk rock Githyanki, just to draw some parallels to the old 5e. The Null and the Talent, the psionic classes. I really tend to think of psionics as the magic that you do in sci-fi, with your big example being Star Wars and the Force. Like all those abilities are clairvoyance and telekinetics and telepathy and all of that stuff. I think that a little bit too much of their broader fantasy leanings may have gotten into the book than I was expecting, shall we say.
What is too much, and what is like, obviously you have this opinion based on the build up to the launch of the game or whatever. I don't know everything that they said in interviews. I didn't follow all the interviews and stuff like that. I don't know if they said that there was supposed to be a focus on this or not on this or whatever. Obviously, at some point, they decided that it was important to have this stuff in the book. It is in the book. So obviously, at some point, they made the decision. And like science, fantasy, space fiction. I do agree that it is like a smaller niche, like of fantasy. Like I can't think of many fantasy products that are like space based, except for like Star Wars, which I do think is not sci-fi. It is science fantasy.
Sci-fi, yeah, it's got science window dressing, but it's a fairy tale.
Space fantasy,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like, so besides Star Wars, I don't know that there's a ton that I would consider fantasy set in space. But there's obviously Sigil, and then there's
I was going to say D&D does it too, but they
Yeah.
leave it for the supplements, right?
I mean, kinda. There's still stuff about the planes in these core books and things like that, and the planes are
Yeah,
ultimately
and I'm
not
absolutely
necessarily
fine with
involved
that
in
as
the
a kind of preview as to what's to come,
Mhm.
or even talking about the structure of your multiverse or whatnot. I'm fine with. It's when those things from the multiverse, because when you see that in the back of the PHB and you're like, oh, interesting. Oh, I want to go to there. Like I want to be like, I can be a fighter and go to the plane of fire or whatever. I don't have to be a genasi or some other elemental thing to do
Yeah,
that. But
I don't think I can disagree with you that, like, I mean, except for the time I did disagree with you, but if we consider the core rulebook as an extremely precious thing, wherein each page is an extremely precious thing, because
that
this
is
is
the thing.
this is all the rules we got for the first year of this game, right? Like this is
Mhm,
all the
mhm.
rules we got for this for these past several months. If we consider every page precious, then do I think that it was a good use of page resources to add the Miminek, or the Time Raider, or the Null, or the Talent? I would say the Talent is my most borderline yes, just because I think that the Talent is such a interesting niche that isn't anywhere else in the game that I would loathe to see it go. But like, if I imagine that we had maybe the Acolyte instead of the Null, and then the Beast Heart instead of the Talent, would I think that would be a better core book? Actually, maybe yes. like yeah, maybe I do. Um, because I do agree that, like, if we're talking about fantasy, we're broadly speaking talking about high fantasy. And then space fantasy is like a great supplement that you can put out where you can go into space and do all the space stuff and, that niche of campaigns. But I would say, like, the broad spectrum of games that are played are not played in a space fantasy setting. Like the vast majority are played in a either low fantasy or high fantasy setting of some kind, where it is, swords and sorcery and knights and dragons and things of that nature. And then to spin a large part of your book on psionics and alien four-armed alien guys, And then to not have in your game some pretty basic stuff like an underwater ancestry, right? Like where's your
beast
merfolk
folk,
or your
like
titans?
a beast folk
A
type.
beast folk, yeah. Where's your
Yeah.
furry support? Draw steel, you know? Where's your frog guy? Yeah.
Everyone's gotta have a frog guy.
Everyone's dying for that frog man.
Listen. As long as they have a unique, bespoke name and you don't just call them ribbits, right, Jay?
I'm gonna have to cut this out because you don't drag in a personal off-camera argument we've had in the middle of our recording.
And
No.
force you into a tangent where you just go off on frog guys for 10
Listen,
minutes.
the Ribbits, it's a bad name. It's a bad name for a fantasy ancestry. Whatever. Anyway. No, I think so. I think, like, if we're talking about the 4 pillars, tactical, heroic, cinematic, fantasy, I definitely hit tactical, definitely hit heroic. Cinematic, by their definition, they hit, but their definitions maybe not the broad definition of cinematic. And then fantasy, yes, they hit it, but they also included
It's a little
some
too broad.
some non-standard elements in there that are surprising, and maybe you wish that there were some more standard options in there instead. But, for the game that we got, obviously, the options we have are plenty. We got dwarf, we got elf, we got human, you're fine. You're gonna do okay. You got dragon guy and devil guy. I mean, that's 70% of player characters anyway, so I think we're okay. But it definitely is something that's, like, worth questioning and worth, like, examining and thinking critically about, because what else are we here for if not to nitpick the games we love?
What else are we here for if not to shit on that which we love? Yes. The Cleveland steamer of critical affection. And with that said, let's end the episode.
I'll just hard cut at that. All right, see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.